Sports for Real with Coach Hall. Well, last night it finally happened. Purdue and UCONN, the two best teams in college basketball over the last couple of years, finally met on the court, this time to decide the national championship. And it didn't disappoint. For most of the game, it was nip and tuck. But in the end, UConn's superior shooting pulled away from Purdue to claim their second straight national championship. Now, a lot of people had picked UConn because of the way UConn had been playing and for the fact that they were still champions from last year, but I had Purdue pegged to win the championship. But it still came down to one thing. We knew that Edey was going to score, but could his cast of characters help him out? And in the end, they did not. Edey scored 37 of his team's 60 points, and the next high man was 12. So if you look at 49 of 60, you got very little impact for the rest of the players. And that proved pivotal because on the other side, UConn had balanced scoring. They weren't quite as hot as they were against Alabama down the stretch, but they scored enough to pull away from Purdue. And if you can't make baskets, you're not going to win the game. We saw that on the women's side. Iowa kind of did the same thing. They faded away down the stretch. And if you look at the history of basketball, most of the times you're going to have teams that do fade away down the stretch. And it looks like that these teams are dominating, and they're really not. It's just you score a couple baskets in the end, and the other team did not, and the lead grew, and that just happened to be what the final score. But Zach Edey, the two-time Player of the Year center, the big man, the 7'4" center, he didn't disappoint. He scored 37. He probably could have scored more. And one other thing about that UConn, they're making Coach Dan Hurley sound like some kind of genius, like he just knows the right buttons to push at the right time, and it's kind of like a Phil Jackson kind of effect. But he said at halftime that the approach they were taking against Edey wasn't working. So it's not like he had the perfect game plan lined up. The same game plan that eventually worked for UConn is the same game plan that has worked for eons in basketball. If you got a star player like a Zach Edey, you pretty much let him try to score and do whatever it is he's got to do and not get his other teammates involved as much. So if he's taking all the shots and you can slow him down a little bit, that changes things for the rest of the players. They didn't contribute at all. I was starting to say very much, but at all. He scored 37 of the 60, and that wasn't enough to outscore a complete team of UConn. If you take a look at the team that UConn beat to get to the finals, North Carolina State, they used the same approach against DJ Burns. You let Burns take most of the shots, and yes, he's going to score a lot, but at the same time, he's not getting his teammates involved the way he had the entire tournament. And that affected him because he was off pretty much against UConn, and UConn was able to pull away from them in the same fashion. So if you're going to get to a championship level, you're going to have to continue to play how you play to get you there. And Zach Edey did his part, but the other players, they just didn't step up, they left him hanging. So again, we must congratulate UConn for winning back-to-back national championships, but there's nothing invincible about that team. And when they start talking about some of the greatest teams in college basketball history, they wouldn't even make the top 20. But I will give them credit. They can put that ball in the basket. If you give them enough room to shoot, they're going to hit it. And they were a good shooting team. But it's going to be interesting to see what other teams do to catch up with them. Because if you find a team that can shoot like that and they start running all those screens like they do, they're going to get some shooters open, and you're just going to have to outwork those guys. And right now, they just a step ahead of everybody else. So you must tip your cap and say congratulations to the UConn Huskies for winning back-to-back national championships. This has been Sports for Real.